To open the location settings, go to Setup, Location, and Location Settings. Double-click or Control-O on the practice name to open this window. Some practices may have 2 locations set up, but most will just have the one. The first tab is the Details tab. This is where you enter details for the practice's address. There is a connection between this tab and the ACC 45 form because the city that you enter in here will populate the location of the ACC 45. So the city entered in this field will appear when completing any ACC 45 form. Coming to the Postal and Accounting tab, this is where you can enter a separate postal address for the practice, so if they're using a PO box you can enter this information here. The capitation section isn't an area practices really need to worry about. This is for PHO GP clinics, and the trainer would enter this when the practice is set up. So most GPs would be PHO CBF funded, and they would either be Access or Inter. We can see the effect it has on invoicing. I just F2 to bring up a patient and Mickey Mouse. Okay. And I'll just exit that. Now when I come to invoice Mickey, and if I put in consultation, on the right hand side we can see a tick in claim and capitated, so this reflects what you've got set up in the location settings. Under capitation it comes into the invoicing part of MedTech. So I'll just open that back up. And your IMS or immunisations most likely will be non-capitated, but some practices might have some capitation there. But like I said, that capitation area is more for the trainer or someone setting up MedTech, so the practice doesn't need to worry about that. Okay. Coming down to the accounting section now, you can choose the statement period for the practice. So you can decide to have it daily, weekly, fortnightly or monthly. Most practices will have it running monthly. Coming across to the print mode, the print mode is something that you need to be really careful with. Don't ever change it from what it's set up to be. Most practices will have it set to normal, and that's where it should stay, as it will have a real impact if it's changed. Coming down here you have the option to allow backdating of invoices and payments. Now we would recommend not having this ticked. What this does is it allows for people to come in and alter dates of an invoice or payment, and this means that any accounting reports that you'd already printed out would be incorrect. So it isn't good accounting practice to be changing dates on invoices and payments, and we just recommend not having this function at the practice. The look back range refers to the account holder screen. Depending on what you select in here, it will automatically filter to show you that far back in the account holder screen. So if you have a year selected, it will automatically show you the last year of transactions, and that just saves you going in and having to manually filter each time. The next tab is the Codes and Defaults tab. This is where you can enter default information for when you add a new patient. So on the top left we have address details. If I was to write Wellington in the city field, each time I add a new patient in the F3 screen it would populate with the city to be Wellington, so that just saves the receptionist having to manually type that in each time they add a new patient. Across here we have the health facility number. This is the NIR number which you would obtain from your NIR administrator from your DHB. The HPI facility number is what you will use for your practice in conjunction with the WINS form, and I'm sure most are aware of the HPI organisation ID, as this was recently introduced for the use of ESAM. Patient details, here it's asking what is the default account group you want for any new patients you're adding. So if you add a new patient, in this case their account group will default to be registered patient, and their registration status would default to being registered in the F3 screen. It's also in this tab that you can choose to have the title of the patient appear on the patient palette and in the F2 search, so it would show as Mr., Mrs. or Miss for the patient's name on the palette and when you're searching for them using the F2. Down here to the left we have the default provider. So the default provider is what you would enter for the main provider at the practice. If any lab results come in that are unmatched, they would go to this provider's inbox. So this needs to be a main provider, someone that is checking their inbox regularly. And the unload ref and the SX ref is a hangback to the Southern Cross claiming, and I don't believe any or many practices will be using this anymore. With the address book, there is now the option to auto-allocate the address book codes and also the health agency codes. So this is available after version 20.9, and it's predominantly used at accident and medicals or A&Es. And this is so when a patient comes in and the A&E enters the patient's GP information, rather than going through and having to add a new code for that GP in the address book, instead it will just automatically pick up a code from what you've entered in here. So we have the prefixes MT in the starting number 1, and if I just close out of here, I'll show you an example of how it works. I'll first open the patient register. We can click F3 on the keyboard, come across to the accounts tab, and I have the option to enter the GP or referred by contact. If I click on here, and if I come to search and add, I can add a new address book entry. And basically it's just showing us that in the code it says auto and it's grayed out, which means that it will automatically allocate this code, so I don't need to enter it in myself, it will just do it automatically. The auto allocate option still works when you're adding an address book entry from the toolbar as well. I'll close the patient register and I can open the address book up here, click on new, and you can see here it's also going to auto allocate the code here as well. I'll exit the address book window and I'll get back into our location settings. That covers the codes and defaults tab.